You took one.
Yeah.
And you?
What, you guys?
Don't you like to read?
Oh, hello. Are you going to...
Some good books. Yeah. No, we're still here. I'll give you some good books.
We can ask questions?
Absolutely.
Oh, is it yours?
No, it's the guys.
Yeah, she has like some questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So my... Go,
What is your
go
question?
for it. Yeah.
What is your questions?
So my question is,
protection.
Yeah.
I'm too cheap for you. Yeah, so my question is, like, in the Quran there is 72 virgins sent for those who go to heaven. Why is it so?
Okay. Well, the problem is you're talking about the virgins, 72 virgins in heaven. First of all, the people lives in heaven with a God. They are not like us. They are other creation.
Yeah, but the question
You
is
understand?
why you say that when you go to heaven you have like 72 virgins.
I think can you answer this question?
Like why 72 virgins?
Why is it a motivator?
Yeah. What's the motivation for that?
So the motivation is the man who so you see the motivation that you have in paradise are similar of nature the motivation that human beings have here, you know, because when God speaks of heaven, he says and it's a beautiful garden with rivers, and you know you're everlasting, and there's no hunger, and there's no sorrow, there's no, right, all these things that we want in this life we get in heaven even better.
Okay.
Because everyone wants to be happy most of the times, right?
But why the sexuality? And why 72?
Yeah.
Why?
So sex is not something that Islam sees as something negative.
No. Okay.
You know, sex is not something that is negative. Sex is something that is actually encouraged.
Okay.
You know, but it's encouraged in the right way.
In the right way. In
Yeah.
the right way, you could expect 72 virgins. Is this the right way?
No, not in this world. Here you could never have 72.
No, in this world, but in another world, it's right. Like, doesn't make any sense. Because if I am a woman, I can expect for 72 men.
Yeah. Okay. In Abrahamic religion, in all Abrahamic religion, women cannot have more than one partner. That's their religion. Why is that? Allah says so. Because we believe in Islam, Allah knows the best for us.
Okay.
And when we go to heaven, why? Same question is why we don't have this like a big numbers of wife here on earth? Because I can't do that. As a man now, to have more than one wife, first of all, there is many reasons to have more than one. If the wife cannot give you kids, if, for example, if I'm able to please two women physically, third, if financially I can support them. So, men like me cannot. So I stick in one. There is many things stopping me from doing that, so I stick in one. That's why Allah said in the Quran, so keep it in one. You understand? He said you can marry twice, 2, 3, 4, but Allah requires justice. Justice is equality in emotional, financial, and physically be able to do it. You understand? If I can't do that, financially, me personally, maybe physically I'm strong, but financially I can't. You understand? So I stick to my one. Okay. What about the heaven? In heaven, we all physically perfect.
Okay.
Yeah. In heaven, we all, with the financial, Allah support that because Allah give us policies and He rewards us for everything. So one of the things is the man gets that much of numbers of Allah. He said of women he gives. Second of all, the women of the earth, we call them people. I'm from the dust.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm from Adam and Adam from dust. And you also from Adam and I'm from dust. So we are the children of the dust. So you become like the most beautiful and most respectable and the highest woman in heaven. They are the other creation Allah promised us in the Jannah or in heaven. They are there. Allah created them for the good believer to serve and this. So also the women, they're going to have servant, but they're not in sexually relationship with them. The women will be with the man the man in the earth, or Allah going to give another man in heaven.
Well, so from what I understand, I don't know about what you just said there, but from what I understand is that the scholars basically say that, you know, you asked me about, so would women have
72.
Right? So from my understanding, the scholar said that the Prophet Muhammad doesn't actually say no. He leaves it open. And some say it's because maybe he was a bit shy in mentioning it to the females. But in terms of so the way it works with like, because before you asked about 72 versions, it's not in the Quran, by the way. It's a hadith. It's a hadith. So it's a separate literature. But it does mention in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there will be women for man who go to paradise. So it is in the Quran. And the reason being is that before you even ask me about those virgins, you need to understand what paradise is and what paradise does to us, you know? So the principle of paradise is that paradise is that what you will in your soul, but that you haven't seen or you haven't heard of. So everything that you want in this world, you will have in paradise, much better, you know? So if you, I don't know what your wishes are, right? But I'm sure that you don't want to die. No one wants to die, right? You want to live on for everyone. So what is the most extreme way of death? What's the opposite of death? Living forever, right? So paradise seems to be a place where all these wishes are fulfilled. It doesn't matter what it is that you want, you will have. Those verses about virgins are usually tied in when it is about encouraging man to do certain things. So there are certain verses where it talks about war and men going to war. And then virgin is mentioned as motivation.
But why a virgin, not like a normal woman?
I'm a man. If you're telling me that if I go to fight and protect the world or protect my town, and in turn, if I die doing that, I will have reward in the next life, then that to me might be appealing.
Okay, like if I offered you 72 virgins, is it more important than 72 women? Like the virginity is a thing.
So virginity. You know, the virginity, it just means that these women have never been married.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it means they've never. Yeah, they've never been married. They're like a new creation, like you were saying.
But my question is behind the motivation, right?
Yeah.
So you motivate people to do something. Either good to get reward, which is quite flashy, quite desiring. So in opposite to this, like when I compare it to Jesus, he would be motivating you to do good, and he wouldn't motivate you so you will have multiple partners. Sure. Multiple women waiting for you. And that's where I see the motivation comes pure, because you don't go to do something, so you'll get.
But you see, that's the difference between like Christianity and in Islam. Islam does not necessarily look at the sexual intercourse as something that is flashy or less spiritual. In fact, what Islam says is that intercourse with a partner can be a very spiritual experience that a human being can share in this world ever. I mean, it's just the most intimate relationship you can share with anyone in this world is it's precisely that. Now, remember, that motivation is not for everyone. Certain people might be totally motivated by other things. The problem with the Quran is that which many people don't understand is this book speaks to many, many, many people, not just like to me, to you or myself. If you ask me, those virgins are not my motivation to go to paradise, okay? The Prophet says, in fact, the highest reward in paradise is to see and to be with God. That's the highest reward. It's not the 72 versions.
But why do you have to mention 72? Why didn't you motivate people to be content with only one partner? Why do you have to give the option? Because when you give people the option for multiple, obviously I would be amazed by the option to multiple.
But you see, that's the thing. paradise is hyperbole. Paradise is, if we think about our worldly minds, it is a very extreme place that you can't imagine, you know. I mean, the fact that you will never die, this is something that we cannot grasp. We live in a world, we've seen people die, we see trees falling down, we see flowers disintegrating into the earth and coming back. We are familiar with the cycle of death and life. But paradise speaks about something very totally opposite. It says, you will live forever. That to me is very extreme if I think about it. Imagine living forever. That, just to wrap your head around it, that's very difficult. So the motivation with the virgin speaks to a person out there.
But you know, when I think of the motivation, I don't think the motivation behind having multiple partners is pure. Like,
based upon, because it's flashy, because it's what? It's low?
Like, yeah, like why would you change your mind just because you're going to heaven? All of a sudden you won't think of it as a flashy for yourself?
But if you look at society, this is how society works. The way we operate in society as human beings, and I'm not comparing society to heaven, but I'm saying there is this reward and punishment, what's it called, systems that we abide by. You know that if you're in a car and you drive over the red lights, you might actually do it. You know that. You might actually do it. But the moment you know that there's a police car behind you, you will never do it. Right? So there's a motivation, like what's it called, a physical motivation that stops you from driving across the red lights. Yeah, and then there's other schemes in society. In this country, I don't know if it's still like that. People who are married would have greater, what's it called, benefits by the law. So the law was designed in a way to motivate people to marry because you would have more benefits. That's why loads of the gay people were campaigning to also have the marriage status because it would just give people more advantages.
Where's the implication to the 72 virgins in there?
Oh, so it's found in the hadith. But let me tell you something. I can't comment on it too much. I've heard it many times, believe me not. But I've never really looked into it. It was never interesting to me. You know, it was never interesting to me. I'll be honest with you. It was not something that I spent in time trying to understand. But I know that some scholars say, well, 72 is just, you shouldn't actually add a number to it. It just, in the Arabic language, when they say, for example, 9 or 7, it means a lot. You know, but I understand that you're coming slightly from a modernistic, perhaps slight influence, feministic influence, and you look at that and you'll be like, wow, this book, if it's from God, why is it telling people to aim for something like which you call so flashy and so low?
Yeah, because like, you know, when I read the Bible, Jesus would never motivate people by these things. And moreover, Jesus lived a life without any woman at all.
Yeah.
So,
but Jesus' situation is different from Moses' situation, and Moses' situation is different from Abraham's situation. They're all slightly different. I feel like sometimes, and I understand you have great love and admiration for Jesus, which I also have. But Jesus is in Jerusalem, and he doesn't have to fight. He doesn't have an army to lead, right? Jesus is a carpenter from Bethlehem, right? And he goes to the Pharisees and he has a conversation with them. That's Jesus' struggle to bring back or to reignite the spirit of the law with the people, because the Pharisees, they've got lost into the law, you know. Now the law is their God and they've forgotten what the law is actually all about. So Jesus' ministry is very unique compared to Moses' situation. Moses is a refugee. for example. So Moses is a refugee who grows up in the house of the Pharaoh, then realizes who he really is, and then he flees. So that's different implications. It's a different way God would speak to the audience that receives Moses' book. And the Prophet Muhammad is all of above, not in terms of status or anything. I'm saying in the situation. He is a refugee at one point, then he becomes a leader of a city, then he has to protect the city. How does he protect the city? With an army. Because those people that he comes from rejected his message. They said, no, we are going to worship all our idols. We don't want what you're telling us, and we will fight you for it. Now, there are these verses that come down. All those who believe, be stern, don't falter. You're fighting for God's name. And for those who die, why? Because God is speaking to a psychology that he's experiencing. Maybe the Arabs, because prior to Islam also, and this could be an explanation, but I don't know. But just talking to you, right? Remember, I said I never really looked into this. But the Arabs, prior to Islam, there was a custom that Arabs, they had like no limits to women. There was no limits to women. They would have 10 wives sometimes. It was a strange culture, In fact, they say that Arabs' hospitality was so deranged that sometimes if a guest would come to me, I would be like, oh, by the way, just take my wife, go with her, and do this to her. Right?
So do you think you're treating like a woman like an object?
Yes.
And why?
Yeah.
Like, why should this be correct?
It was incorrect because the Quran comes and stops this practice.
It was or it is?
No, it is incorrect, and it will always be incorrect. The Quran comes and stops this practice. Remember, I'm telling you about how the Arabs were before Islam, right? So the Islam says, no, you can't have just 10 wives and do whatever you want to them. There is a limit to that, how much you can have. And then also there's responsibilities that comes with having a wife. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. And this is something that is not just, there's a big problem amongst religious folks and females. I'll be honest with you. There's a big problem, and I feel like sometimes religious folks, they don't tend to really be serious and very sympathetic towards the problem that we have, because why is it that women throughout history have been treated in a very bad way, if you look at it, right? In this country, there was this thing called wife selling.
Okay.
People used to sell their wives in the UK. This is back in the 18th century, right?
So this I knew. I knew that they do this with...
Oh, you knew about this? Children. Yeah.
But the way Jesus would stop it, the immoralities, the way people would just have one partner throughout your life and be fidel to it. And isn't that harder than telling people, okay, you can have up to 4, but you gotta treat them equally. And at the same time, it actually encourages in people to be financially more stable. So for example, a lot of my Muslim friends, what I see is they strive to be successful. And I wonder if there is a motivation behind to actually have multiple female, because this is the only religion that actually allows for female. And whether, even though the whole society says it's not right, they can justify it. Because if you treat them equally, then you're allowed. And I believe that's a really big motivation, because if there is something that you might feel is not quite right, like why God isn't telling me to have only one wife, then, but at the same time, this guy is quite cool, because he actually allows me to have 4. So why wouldn't I actually love this guy? It's hard to have 4 partners.
Alone, right?
But if there is an option, and you feel like it's right and justice because there is a God who justifies it, then you kind of question it. Because when I look at Jesus' profile, he's very pure, and he doesn't have any female who would have
But don't you see? Don't you think that? And I agree with you, right? I agree with you that Jesus hasn't had any a woman, but we must believe that as well. But don't you see that that also could be sort of like a misogyny covered in spirituality, which may have come from doctrines that weren't originally there. Because if you think about it, so the moment I give myself to my wife, I become less pure. But you're saying it makes you more pure when you're not married, or when you're not engaged into like love. I mean, the very existence of who we are, because remember, like having intercourse is not just about lust, also, right? It's about family and children and
I'm not saying like Jesus was more pure.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I've misunderstood.
No, it's not that. It's just simply the fact, like simply the fact that you can have both partners.
Yeah.
I know it was back the times. It had to have so the territory could expand. Right. But when I look at it simply mindedly, it just doesn't feel right.
Sure.
Like obviously might be justification.
Sure.
But just when you do it simple mindedly, it doesn't feel right.
But the Quran actually doesn't encourage people to have 4 wives. It just tells you, look, that's the limit, and it is steeped in the culture that existed where there was no limits, you know. In fact, and this is what loads of people claim. I don't know if it's true, but they say actually there isn't another religion that puts a limit on it. I think this monogamy, it is more of a cultural, like sociological development than a theological belief in the Bible. You know, because if you look in the Bible, you will find that man of God would have sometimes more than 2 wives. But I think the Quran is very explicit in saying, look, can't have more than that. You know, because I mean, look, this is the alternative to what the Islamic religion tells. The alternative is, by the way, one of the reasons why there's so much divorce happening is cheating. The alternative, if you're saying to me, okay, there are 3 alternatives. One alternative is you don't cheat, right? You don't.
That's an alternative. You have another wife.
Yeah, 1 wife and you don't do it, right?
So you have another wife. You have 2 wives.
Yeah. Or
cheated.
And the worst one is cheating. Now, for some strange reason, we live in a world where you may be married, but then you go out of your marriage and you had mishaps. But as long as you haven't married the other person, you know what? It can happen. Human make mistake. But the moment you say marriage, it becomes a problem. But like, I think what people sometimes don't tend to see is that when it says you can have 4 wives, it means this is 4 households. It means 4 sets of bills to pay. It means 4 different types of souls.
Take responsibility, but it's freedom as well.
It can be. Have you ever watched? I've watched these. I used to watch these shows about Mormons. It was a show in America, and they were showing how Mormons would like co-parent and sister wives and all. Before, when I was a young man and I wasn't married, I found it very attractive. Because I came from a culture where, which is pretty much sort of like teenage culture in the Western world for some people, not everyone, that it was cool. You were the more girls you had, the cooler you were, right? So with my very naive young mind, when I came to the religion, I was like, wow, you can have 4 wives. That's crazy. Right, what you were saying about being happy about it. But then I got married. Then I had a child, and I started to realize, this isn't that fun. It's not that fun because.
But
you agree that in the beginning it was a big.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is. It is.
That a religion actually allows it.
But when you read, when you read the passage, when you read, I can't find the passage now. It's in Surah. Yeah, because I was reading it just the other day. When you read the passage, it's not the way God paints it. It's not like you have none, you know, from Playboy. It's not that. It's telling you, look, have 1, 2, 3, or 4. But if you fear that you can't be just, so the key term here is not if you fear you can't have enough sex, or if you can't, you know, the key term is just. If you fear not to be just, then be with one. And you remember we were talking about a tradition where they were talking about those virgin, you know, 70 virgin. There's a similar tradition where the Prophet says, and this is a warning against the man. He says, on the day of judgment, there's going to be a man who's lopsided. I don't know what that means, whether it's physical or metaphorical. It means he will be lopsided. Reason being, because in this world, he was not being just with his wife. He was not being just with them.
So he's punished in heaven.
He's being punished. There's a punishment literally waiting for someone who... So what God is telling you is, look, these are the boundaries I've given you. However, this, if you can't, marry one, and that's best for you.
Well, when you go to heaven, you imagine a place where there's justice and there's no more punishment. You would imagine it.
No, this doesn't happen in heaven. This happens on the day of judgment. So when you're judged, when you looked at, okay, how did you treat your wife? How did you treat your children? Oh, by the way, you had 2 wives. So everything that a person would go through once, I have to go through twice. You know, how did I spend my money? Did I actually spend money with my wife? All these things. Yeah. Equally, you will have a big problem. So it is a romanticism that many young men have, but I guarantee you don't even have to go to the day of judgment. Just get married here. You will understand that marriage is something that is very difficult, that takes a lot of energy, and that takes a lot of maturity. And I would never advise anyone to just go around and get married to like all these women. When we have these situations where we have Muslims who do that, and then they cause havoc. But it's because they haven't followed the injunction. The injunction is, are you man enough and responsible enough to do this? And most men are not in modern times.
In Quran, there are no female characters.
Only married. Why you only have married now?
That's a good question.
No female characters. Like comparison to the Bible, you see Deborah, Ruth.
So there's Mary in Quran.
But there is only one female.
No, there's many names. But so you know about the chapter of Mary in the Quran?
No.
Woo! Okay, let me show you.